Just a brief comment about some energies here. We've talked about energy, and we talked about the fact that there's kinetic energy and potential energy, and then rest energy. To sort of describe, this is the energy of motion, energy of position, and energy of mass. Though in classical physics, the rest energy doesn't really show up until you get into, in terms of development of physics, until you get into what's considered semi-classical physics, turn of the 20th century. Einstein shows up and you get into where rest energy starts to make a big difference in terms of analysis. But there are other energies that sometimes show up, and one of them is chemical energy and thermal energy. These are kinds that are generally thrown into books, and the question is, where does that fit into it? Should we actually have a list of 5 things instead of 3? And I'm going to say no, we don't actually need a list of 5 things. Chemical energy is the energy because of bonds. It takes a certain amount of energy in order to rip 2 particles apart, or energy in order to get to, I guess we're talking chemistry, atoms to combine. And so it is based upon the position of one object relative to another. So it is actually a specific type of potential energy. Now, some problems, we'll talk about chemical energy as sort of a separate entity, but it is just a specific case of potential energy. Thermal energy, we generally view it as energy that is being bled off, being transferred from a system to another system in terms of heat. And so thermal energy is somehow related to the temperature of an object is related to the kinetic energy. And there's another video I do where I relate kinetic energy to temperature. And so thermal energy is just a specific case of kinetic energy. It's sort of a catch-all, unfortunately. So you are driving along, and even if you're on perfect rolling of the tires on the road, the car still generates heat. There is energy being lost in terms of heat, and so because kinetic energy is much easier to deal with on a particle level, thermal energy on a more of a macroscopic level. So thermal energy is sort of a catch-all for energy loss, usually. When you get into, if you get into thermodynamics enough, then you start dealing with this a lot more specifically. You tend to talk about thermal energy when you're dealing with systems that are so complicated that talking about the kinetic energy of particles really becomes inconvenient. So it is sort of a catch-all, but it is not a different type of energy.